Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our second event of the Herd Winter Racing Series. Tonight, we have 3 laps of the Seaside Sprint route, which will see us go over the S's 4 times, and we'll finish on the Watopia Sprint. We have 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second to the start of a race. It's lights out, and away we go. Go, 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 go. And this is where I go a bit crazy and try and find out where my rider actually is. I am joined by Chris and Brent. Guys, who are you following tonight?
Who you got, Chris?
I will take Ian again.
Alright, I will get
watched him last week.
I will be following it's Seifert, sorry, Ed, if I'm mispronouncing your name.
And I'm following Paul Bailey, and his surname is spelled incorrectly, but we'll let that go. Paul is racing for one of our A teams in ZRL as a slight accident. He told me he'd put on 4 kilos over the summer, and he'd correctly adjusted his weight in Zwift, and then Zwift didn't take the update, so he managed to do 4.2 or 4.3 over 20 minutes, and he got upgraded to A. So Paul is in our herd of sacrificial lambs, which we're fairly confident is the best team name in ZRL, other than the herd of blazing bidets, I should add. But Paul is doing really nicely. He's currently sat 4th wheel as we head left up the not so commonly used side out the pens, hitting a 4% hill before we head left towards the S's. So he's had a nice start, all going well.
Ed is currently sitting in 53rd, coming up the little hump out the start here. Looks like he's gonna maybe try and catch on with this group that's coming through him. He's 3 seconds off another group, so I think he's gonna try and catch on the group that's coming through him.
Ian is just to the top of the Steve Pritchard Memorial Descent reverse. Still tucked onto the back of this front group, just about to hit the rollers. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, but he has pushed up nicely and is in the draft. How's your rider, James?
Yeah, no, he's doing well. He's still at the front of the front group. So quick chat about the route. So there are 2 main kick points on this lap, one of which we're about to come up to. It's the last of the S's where it hits about 7%, and we've also got the entrance into Volcano, and those are really the 2 potential areas where you can thin the front group a little bit. However, this front group is absolutely chuffing enormous. Probably about 40 at the moment. I can see Bishop, unhappy with his earlier performance, decided to do it again, perhaps not realising that only his first result counts. So Bishop from OTR is in here as well. I don't really understand why people do this race more than once, but they can do. However, their results on Zwift Power are annulled if they've done it more than once. And we are just hitting the last of the S's, and this is where things ramp up quite a bit. Paul's holding around about 400 watts, 440, 450, 460, and he's not going to do it Matt DeFreitas, is he? He's right off the front, and he's got a bit of company with Alex Cooper from Wahoo Cole, who we know very well from our Monday night time trial series, don't we, Brent?
Yes, he's beat me many, many times.
Yeah, he's beaten me every single time I've ever raced against him, but we won't talk about that too much because we're now going downhill. We're about to turn left towards the sprint that doesn't count for anything at all, apart from the fact it is the finish line in around about 3 laps' time. But Paul's doing well. Chris?
Yes, Ian has survived that first final kicker as part of the S's and is still tucked in nicely into this front group. A lot of ATP kits in here again, so something to watch for. I stalked the Zwift Power before we logged on here, and it looked something like, of the top 11 ranked riders, 8 or 9 of them were ATP. So we could well see some really coordinated attacks on this.
Yeah,
And
ATP seem to love race 2 and race 6.
Yep.
And sticking it to OTR.
So fireworks for sure. And you mentioned the two more pronounced pinch points, James, but if the front group is pressing, there are, this thing's a roller the whole way around. So after that volcano ramp, you got the secondary ramp that gets up to the banner. So that was a point earlier. This downhill gravel section, even though it's downhill with the rolling resistance, this is a place where you can get caught out. So something to be mindful of here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul is trying to stick his nose in front as much as possible. He evidently hasn't watched Orjan and Bowser play the field. But he's very, very happily in the front group. Brent, what's going on with Ed?
Ed is just past the sprint line, coming up to the Dirty Surpresa, going downhill. He did a good job up over the kicker, got a feather, used it well right there, and he's found his group. It looks like they're starting to work together nicely. They'll probably gobble up. Hopefully there's one rider 4 seconds in front of him. Hopefully they'll gobble him up and keep going, but he's riding steady and he's found his group. He's doing well.
Good news. We at the front, we are around about 400 meters from a right-hand turn before we kick up into Volcano. It's about a probably a 15-20 second climb at around about 5%. And that's the second of our main pinch points over the course of this lap. There's a couple of mini ramps once you get into the volcano, and Paul's sticking his nose in front again. I do wonder if he's trying to really, really push his best 20 minutes to so it feels like he's a validate rather than one who's really, really, really close. But we've got a couple of WKG, well, certainly a couple of WKG jerseys in here. I'm trying to see who the other one is, see if I recognise any names. Waddington, I think it's Paul Waddington at WKG as well in there, and Stuart Lynn out the herd has gone for a big kick straight up the hill. He's pushing 8, 9, 10 watts a kilo, trying to make a bit of a breakaway with 15 kilometres left to go in the race. Evidently he's been chatting with Matt DeFreitas, but Paul is holding steady in the group. Looks like he should be okay. Depends on how much this group actually chase. A few of them seem to be fairly intent on chasing down, perhaps not realising that the group would naturally catch. But yeah, I think Stuart might regret that 10 plus push up that hill into Volcano. We are all back together again, and everything is normal, and the world is a better place.
Maybe he doesn't know the difference between a kick and a sprint either, James.
Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, front group all back together. Chris.
Well, the front group may be all back together, but back here it is blown to smithereens. So Ian is doing well to stick on some wheels. He's found an ATP rider. He's got Bruce Bottorff, friendly name, right behind him, but it is very much strung out. He's sitting right now 27th, 28th, so high 20s in terms of placing. Needs to stick with some wheels here in order to form a little subgroup and not get caught up from anyone behind. And so he's putting in a really good effort here. It looks like I would wager that this little group of six or eight that are kind of strung out fore and aft will come together here in a moment and be group 2 on the road.
Yeah, it's looking like the front group has 26 riders in it, but your group of 6 or so look like they're getting really, really close to catching back on if they can work together.
So Ed's just on the volcano kick right now. He's sticking with his group, but a couple of the riders from that group have gone off the front, so he's staying with the main body of 4 of that group, but there are some that have made another breakaway group in front of him that he's fallen behind, but he's stuck pretty good. He did a little kick up the volcano, and now he's in the volcano trying to hang in there.
Yeah, it looks like that possible catch from a group behind has not worked out. Looks like we've got, just judging by the map, we've got a single rider stuck between the front group and Ian's group of 6 or so, and looks like they're not going to make it back in. So front group has definitely thinned out a bit. Paul is near enough back wheel on this group at the moment. I think he's still doing okay, but we're going to head into the S's very shortly. How's Ian doing, Chris?
Well, we put together a group of about 5 here. That lone rider was Bruce trying to bridge the gap, and he's still putting in a massive effort. Ian is now going after him up the road, trying to drive this group on. The group behind them looks to be 12 seconds back on the road, not doing crazy numbers. So this could very well be a group of 4 to 6. Looks to be finishing off seconds back on the road, not doing crazy numbers. Doesn't look like anybody's. So this could very well be a group of. Bruce is still making a good run for it. Ian settling in nicely. How's it looking up front?
Yep, still nicely grouped up. Got a couple turns more until the steeper of the S's. How's Ed doing, Brent?
Good. He's stuck in here. They've gobbled up one rider, so they're a group of 5 going in. There's a solo up ahead. They seem to be putting a little bit of time back into him. He's currently sitting in about 60th place. He was 66 last week, so he's in a real good spot to improve his positioning, but he's doing a good job sticking with his group, not putting his nose in the wind too much and doing some good racing.
Yeah, and we have got one more turn before we hit the steeper of the S's bends, and we'll see what happens here. I suspect there's going to be some more shenanigans going on from the ATP team, but we will see. Paul's got himself back into the front of a group, and we are just kicking now up to 400 or so watts. And just going round the bend before we head downhill again, but it's all looking well in Paul's world at the moment. Not seeing, I don't think can see any other herd jerseys in there. Oh, actually, Doug McKee's in there as well. Good on you, Doug. Got one other, trying to see who that might be. M. Walton, I think that's Matt. And we're heading down hill before we turn left towards the sprint banner, which will show we have 2 laps left to go. How's Ian getting on?
Ian is just coming over this final kicker ramp coming out of the S's. We're a group of 4 here. We've got 2 ATP riders and 1 OTR stuck in here. So I think Ian's done well to find some wheels that have some big team tactics attached to them. So if you see more ATP riders getting shelled off the front, there's a chance that he could draft up and those riders could work together and he could get some free speed and some free placements out of that. So I think strategically, Bruce is still putting in an effort by himself between the front group and this group. He's just ITTing it at 4.5 watts per kilo, 10 seconds up the road. I don't think he's going to catch your front group there, though.
No, front group looks to be well away from anyone else, so it's going to be these guys up front, and we might see another kick up Volcano to try and shell off a couple more riders. But Paul's having a great race so far. He's yet again sticking his nose out in front. Michael Bowser, if you are listening, please help this guy. We're just about head onto the causeway before we head up Volcano again. So that's probably about 1.5 kilometers away, and Paul's doing nicely. He's now drafting in. Good, Paul. Well done. Whereabouts is Ed?
Ed is back into the S's. He's used his draft here early in the S's, so I don't know if he's hurting a bit and he wants to make sure he sticks with his group. I'm sure he knows he's getting another power up when he gets back to the sprint banner, so it's not the worst idea to use it before you get back to that sprint banner. I would prefer to use that draft thing when you get to the kick hill right before you come into the sprint. I think that's probably your optimal location for that to make sure you hold your group coming through. But if you're hurting and you got to do it then to stick on, no problems with that. But he's in his group. He's got another herd rider with him, DB or Dave B. Do we know? Anyway, there's a couple herd riders in this group, so they're kind of working together, keeping it going, but not pushing the pace or taking the wind if they don't have to. Go ahead.
Paul's still doing quite nicely. About 300 yards away from the right-hand turn before we head up the volcano. I say 300 yards, obviously meant meters, seeing as all cyclists of any note use the metric system. But about 200 meters to go, and then we will see if there is any further carnage. I strongly suspect there will be. We are turning right now, heading onto the slopes towards the volcano. 1, 2, 3, 4%. And there's an attack off the front. Again, it's Stuart Lynn, who's racing for one of our A teams in EMEA in ZRL. I'm trying to remember if it's Marmots or Minions. I think it's Minions, but that's again stretch for group into single file, and I think that might have been enough for Paul. Paul, yeah. Paul's definitely had it. He's now down to about 2 watts a kilo. So he's either had a really bad technical or his legs have just said, maybe not tonight, mate. And it might be that glass of red he had before the race, but we will see. I think he's just trying to see if he can hook on to any of the stragglers, but the front group looks to have split in half. And Paul is a little bit off the back of that. I think the first lap and a half might have been a little bit too much, but he's put in a great effort so far. And there's one rider 8 seconds back, and then we've got Bruce Bortoff, who's 30 seconds back. So he might well just sit up a little bit and wait for these guys to come and pick him up. How's Ian doing?
Ian's doing great. We're still in this group of 4, 2 ATP, 1 OTR. We just finished that ramp up into the volcano where Ian very smartly dropped a draft power up. And it wasn't overly aggressive, the ride up in there. They're definitely putting in the efforts to stay ahead of the chase group behind, which is that gap has shrunk from 14 down to 11 seconds here recently. So these 4 are definitely working together. Nobody's lollygagging here. They're putting in, looks like good sharing of the workload to try to stay these 4 away. But great effort by Ian here. Really, really well done.
Yeah,
how's that going back there, Brent?
Good. Ed is they're just in the dirt section coming down the Dirty Sorpresa. He has so he successfully made it across the top of the sprint section in his group, and that group is working well. It looks like they're going to catch up for sure. One rider in front of him. The one rider in front of they're going to catch dropped about a 10 watt per kilo sprint on the sprint segment, so he may want to check the race notes before he shows up for next week. But other than that, they're pulling the work. There's another chase group behind them, about 17, 18 seconds. They seem to be holding that gap, so that's good. This group seems to be working it around their sort of, their threshold level for this race. So they're gobbling up a couple riders in front of them, working together to move up and not give up pace. And, Ed's in here for a real strong result, if he can keep this up. How is it going up at the front with Paul?
Yeah, so I think we should refer to not reading the race notes as doing a Brian O'Connor. Paul is just about to be joined by A. Samard out of Canada, and there's a few scattered riders just behind. They are all doing about 1.7, 1.9, so Paul needs to kick now to catch on to our Canadian friends. He's definitely doing that, holding 400 watts, and I think he's probably going to latch on fairly shortly. However, Sonada's doing like 4.5 watts a kilo, so it might be a bit of a struggle. But Paul is just getting onto his back wheel, and then we've got Bruce Bortoff, who's still 22 seconds behind, and then we've got further groups back about 49, which is Ian's group. Be able to stay ahead and battle it out for 23rd and 24th place. How's Ian's group doing, Chris?
Well, there's some interesting developments here. The two ATP riders just put in a big dig to try to ditch the OTI rider and Ian. Ian has responded to latch on. It looks like they have ditched the OTR rider. So now we are down to 3, but we are catching up with the leaderboard keeps changing on me, but it looks like LaForest has been dispatched by the front. We're about to catch him or her in the S's. So we might become 4 again if he or she can latch onto this group. But it looks like we have lost Gallo off the back from that effort from the two ATP riders. So they are not content to go around as a group of 4. They are trying to put in digs, ditch people, and move up the leaderboards. But great job by Ian to put in the effort and stay with them.
So I will say we're starting to have lapped riders, so I'm not sure whether LaForest is a lapped rider or not. I've just added, so Doug McKee of the herd is still in the lead group, so I've added him as a 4th panel here, so that's just if people want to watch the front.
Yeah, I think for riders we're seeing doing like a 1.5 to 2 are probably the guys that are being lapped at this stage. Paul is still riding with Asamard, and they still have 24 seconds on Bruce behind on his own. So I suspect these two and probably Bruce, who's got a 20-second gap on the Ian group, will probably stay away. But we have a solitary lap left to go, so not too far at all. Obviously not seeing what's happening at the front at the moment, but Paul's just gone over the sprint banner to signify the final lap, and obviously he hasn't realised that he's cycling in the wrong coloured Tron, unless he has some part of Dutch heritage in him, and Asamard as well. They obviously haven't listened to our podcasts, because if they're both in pink, they'd probably still be in the front group, but maybe that's something for them to try next time round. Chris.
James.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, so we've had a little bit of interesting developments through the S's here. Gallo from OTR, who was ditched, stayed within him or herself and rejoined the group, so well done there. And they did pick up LaForest, who, judging by the distance traveled, is on the lead lap, so that is a potential position gain there. So well done to these 4 now, becoming 5 and continuing to scoop up riders. Looks like the next one up the road would be Bruce, who continues to just ITT it at 4 watts per kilogram, so he might stay away here, but we shall see.
Brent.
So Ed is just on the bridge, coming back in towards the S's. They did their group did manage to catch up 2 riders in front of them, so that group of 4 has swelled now to a group of 6 by moving up and catching the riders in front of them, which is good. However, it looks like in the chase group behind him, 2 riders have started really pushing in the back, and they're coming up. The group that Ed's in seems like it's being a little more pedestrian than maybe that ought to be, and I don't know if they can't see that those riders have been closing that gap behind them. So those riders coming from behind are going to close that gap. Whether they'll have enough to push through, obviously, maybe that's part of your race tactics, but my preference is always to at least have the group moving fast enough to keep riders from behind off the back if you can. So they're being maybe not quite aggressive enough in their speed to keep those riders off the back to keep that their position in the race at this point. Apparently Ed also is not a fan of science. He is riding a green Tron. So the other herd rider with him though There's another Pinktron in here, but oh no, it's not the herd rider. There is a Pinktron in there. So there is one fan of science in Ed's group as they come up here. They should just be about a couple seconds from hitting this kick. So I'll be curious to see. Oh, maybe Ed's listening to me as he has gone to the front. He's taking a pull. But I'll be really curious to see if he holds on here when we get around the kicker to keep this group together, if it breaks apart a little now as we're getting, we're 2 laps into this race. Some of these people's legs will be feeling a little tired, and every time you go across one of these kicks, when someone starts to ramp it up, it's going to be a little bit of a burner. So hopefully he'll be able to hold on here for one more lap. How's it looking up with Paul?
Yeah, Paul's just hit the volcano kicker. He's with Atamod, who I think I need to refer to as Antelope. And Paul has thrown the aero power up after Antelope threw the truck power up, despite being in the front for the entire 20 seconds that it lasted for. Paul is drafting his absolute heart out at the moment. I strongly expect we will see a sprint to the finish and a Paul Bailey victory, which will be nice to see, even if his surname is spelled incorrectly. But these two have happily paced each other the way up the volcano mini climb, and they will shortly be heading under the volcano banner, which has no bearing on this race at all, other than hopefully to give a power up.
So Doug McKee, who was my nemesis in our recent Herd Club Championship, is still, actually he's in the lead right now, so he is still with the lead group, and they're heading across the bridge back from the volcano and heading into the S's for the last time. So that's the lead group. Looks like it's about 9 or 10 still, and still going pretty hard.
How's Ian doing, Chris?
Ian's doing really well. We're still tucked in with the same 5, and we just went over the volcano ramp again. What concerns me is that the group behind has swelled, and since we last checked on Ian, that gap went from 14 to now the front rider in that group is showing is only 6 seconds back, and it is at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 riders strong, and they're putting in more watts per kilogram than this group. So a couple of different factors at play. You can tell by the way that Ian's riding that he's paying attention to the way the ATP riders are going. I don't think anybody has a choice after that dig on the last lap. But I think they should be concerned at the group behind catching. And I don't really see, it looks like the efforts have bumped up a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if with only 5-second gap now that this comes together and becomes a massive group sprint to the line.
Ian's actually got a fantastic sprint on him, so he might be less worried than other members in his group. But obviously, you'd rather have a sprint between 3 people rather than 10. So we'll see how that one pans out. Paul is just going over the bridge before we turn right towards the S's. Brent, how's Ed getting on?
Good. So on the kicker into the sprint, the 2 riders did attack off the front. One of them had a feather. One was our other herd rider or herd jerseyed rider here. I don't know what DB is. Let's call him Dog's Breakfast maybe. So he went off the front, and then another herd rider was in that chasing group on the multicolor Tron MX. So we're gonna call him Monkey Xylophone. He caught into this group, so they were coming together, and then they did manage to catch up the breakaway across that thing. So they're now a group of 6 or 7 that are all together in the dirt here. Ed's holding his position, and it doesn't look like the other chase group off the back. They're cooked, except for those 2 riders who bridged across. So Ed's pretty much in the same position in the race he was in, and well, he should be coming up in about 500 meters to the volcano kick. So we'll be curious to see if he can hold on there. Oh, it looks like a couple riders are dropping across the dirt. can't
Jumping
keep
in
up,
quickly,
so-
Brent. Antelope has kicked, and Paul is trying to chase him down. He's kicked with about 3 corners left to go. Paul was trying to chase down around about 400 watts, but Antelope is still holding about 4.5 watts a kilo as we come towards the penultimate turn. I think Paul's decided that might be one effort too many. So it's looking like Antelope's going to take 22nd position as we take the penultimate turn, and then we are going to head towards the last kick before the downhill, before we go to the sprint and the finish. So it's looking like Paul's going to finish in 23rd place here. He's got a 26-second gap back to Bruce, and Antelope's opened up 10 seconds in front. So don't think there's much more to see here. So we'll go back to Chris and find out how Ian's getting on.
Sure. From that group that was chasing behind, it looks like 2 riders made a jump out of that group, bridged the gap, and has joined Ian's group. And everyone else who has since calmed down. So this group grew a little bit, but it could have been much, much worse. So we're now showing Ian sat in with a group of 2, 4, 6, 8 strong as we go through the S's for the last time. So the trick with this is to make sure you get up that final kicker and just keep on the power as you go across it and then down into the downhill. So if you can save enough energy and manage your efforts through the rollers here, just save up 1 or 2 extra little kicks to win that bunch sprint, and he'll be in. But we're about to go up that final ramp for the last time, it looks like.
And Paul Bailey is just about to cross the line, pushing out a big effort just to finish. And he will cross the line in actually 22nd place.
You hate those solo lonely finishes. Those are just the
they really suck.
I've had a few of those too.
Yep.
So Ian's
Ian,
about to finish. If I could jump in here, he is on the downhill. Looked like he tried to super tuck. It wouldn't stick, and now he is facing the group. He's laying on a big sprint now, over 1,000 watts. Coming across the bridge, passing. He's got 1 rider up the road, and he just needs to hold off everybody else behind him. The ATP rider behind him making a big dig now. Oh, it looks like he just got him at the line, but Ian with a strong finish. I can't quite tell what position he finished in, but either way, it was a great effort and a great finish by him. Well managed and a great ride.
yeah, great effort, Ian. And we'll head back to see how Ed's getting on.
So they're coming out of the volcano. His group, they're down to 5, so they did shed a few riders off, and he stayed in the front part of that group. So he's doing a great job to stick in there. We'll see how he manages. He looked like he might have been just suffering a little after the kick into the volcano. He kind of just went to the back of the group, but he put in a little dig to get back on, so that was some good riding. And we'll see how he manages. It's hard. I don't know the sprints of any of these riders, but this group has been together almost the whole race or within a few seconds of each other, so they're all pretty similar amount of strength. So it'll be all about managing, your effort across these rollers. It's not a big group, so if you don't want to get off the back too far, or you'll get dropped off pretty easily on these rollers. So they're coming in strong. He's right in good position. I'll be curious to see what happens in terms of power-ups and stuff. Always, for me, my favorite one to get on this is the feather, because I love getting the feather on that climb and trying to put a little distance in. But if you get the arrow for the sprint, that never hurts either. What do you guys think in the finish? Which one is your favorite?
Well, I think my favourite's the kick on the last hill, and then see if I've got anything left when you get back down to the flat. But it's such a hard finish because you have to push out the numbers on the last of the S's. and then you have to go probably about 5 seconds later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you like that feather on the hill. I'm sure you like that one to put a little space in.
Oh god, yeah.
So for me, I think it's almost even between the aero helmet and the truck, because but if I'm more tired, I almost like the aero helmet more, because to use the truck effectively, you really have to watch what's happening and position yourself. So it can be a little bit more skill based.
Yeah, truck can be good here if you can stay close enough down the hill. That's always my challenge on these ones, is that I get too far back on the hill and then I can't catch up close enough to get a good effective draft to slingshot through with it.
Yeah, I think on this last hill, I don't want to be first over the top. I'd like to be like second or third wheel with an aero power up.
Yeah.
So you've gone like second or third wheel over the hill, so you haven't done a stupid effort, unless like the one or two in front of you have gone absolutely mental. So that you've got something left for the sprint, and then you can overtake the one or two in front of you. But obviously, that all depends on how hard everyone else is going and what you've got left.
Come on, Ed. Ed's just fallen off the group here a bit. Come on, get your legs going. They're putting in the dig here for the final run. You can see they're not quite at that last hill, but they're kind of that second or last roller before that hill, and he's just fallen off the group. I don't think he's quite close enough to draft. That's one thing about the Tron, is not being able to see when your guy goes into the draft. Always drives me crazy. But anyway, he's at the back, so he's gonna have to get ready for this hill. Hopefully he's bird dogging these guys, so he'll be able to come through on the hill. Because they're already in front of him, so he's gonna have to really put in the effort now. He's using his aero helmet even before the hill, so he knows he's got to get back on this group to get into the finish. So good, he's raising his power, getting back into the right number of watts. He's close. Oh, there's a couple of these guys who can really drop it here still at the end, unfortunately. He's got Monkey xylophone right in front of him. He can catch up. But a couple of these other riders in this group obviously had a lot more in the tank, because they're doing like 5-6 watts at the top of the hill. That's a real hard push. Oh, we're getting some funny chat coming in.
It's an interesting spot for chat.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't even chat him in the regular riddle race. Never mind on that part of it. But let's see if Ed can make up 1 second here in the sprint. He's 1-2 seconds back. He's gonna have to drop it like it's hot right now as he comes down the kicker. Here he goes up to 300, 350. Attaboy, Ed. Drop it, spin it. Away you go. Oh, he's finished at the back of the group, I'm afraid. He's put in a big effort here at the end for sure to try and move up, but he wasn't able to. There's some good sprinters in that group, unfortunately for him. So still, he's moved up 10 places from his race last week. He should be really happy with that effort. He did a fine job to stick with that group all the way around.
Yeah, big effort. Well done, Ed. And I think Monkey Xylophone is actually Malcolm X out of the herd. No idea what his real name actually is, but I think that's what he posts under. But a big thank you to our racers tonight. So we had Paul Bailey, Ian Elston, and Ed Sievert. And also a big thank you, as ever, to Craig for supplying our pictures. Thank you to Brent and Chris, Go Be Days, for joining me. And we hope to see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.